Hello and welcome back to my channel. Now I know it's been a while since I've posted the last one, 9 months or so, I'm not sure, just about then, and I guess it's been a while since I've posted, and due to the constraints of the device I'm using and the editing software and life in general with family and work and priorities, it's been difficult and it takes a while. It's hard for me to be able to be consistent with the editing process and writing scripts and creating something that has a level of comprehension to it that I really want to get into the meatiness of whatever it is I'm talking about. And like I said, it takes time, and my apologies if I've taken a while to upload, but I thought in the interim, and I'm still working on those videos, I'm still trying to edit them, I'm still finding the time little by little to get them and piece them together so I can eventually post them, hopefully in the next lifetime, if possible. So in the interim, I thought that, well, I should talk about, or put myself out there and talk about what I just saw. I felt the urgent need to, and I felt a desire to do so, to talk about this film I saw the last couple nights ago. I intended to talk about it earlier, but like I said, responsibilities, time, sometimes. So this film that I saw was The Harder They Come by Hime Samuels, and I think that's his first film. I think that's his first directorial credit to any film I've seen. It was produced by Jay-Z and some other people, and it includes a star-studded cast like Jonathan Majors. I've never heard of him. I've never seen him before in a film, but he's a protagonist or an anti-hero. Within the film, he plays one of the major roles alongside Idris Elba, who's like the anti-villain or the villain, depending on how you look at the story and your subjective view of how you perceive these characters. And some other well-known star-studded faces that we've seen over the years, like Zazie Beetz and Zazie Beetz here, I forgot his name, Marlon Wayans, Lakeith Stanfield, did I get that right? I'm not sure. Lakeith Stanfield? Please, I'm not. Lakeith Stanford. Stanford? Ah, shit. Lakeith Stanfield. And some other players I'm not really familiar with, but overall, they stood out pretty well, even though it was like a lot of characters to feature, a lot of personalities to shape and to bring to the fore of the film, where they felt like pieces of personality, or they were involved in the film enough not to feel like generic pieces of henchmen littered throughout the film, especially as black people. And this film surprised me because, and it was enjoyable because, for one, it's not an atypical film that's been like sewn with the cloth of the same, the issue of race in the country and the problems with race in the country and the oppression of black people in the country and rising amongst or above our oppressors, and especially with romantic comedies that are pretty generic and bland and formulaic and just dull, and just Netflix overall producing these films that are just lacking in substance and story and character and just bland and plunging their hands into the filth. It was refreshing to see something like this brought to the fore. It didn't feel like a black film per se, it just felt like a good story. It felt like good story with good characters that just happened to star black people. And there wasn't this tinge or this preachy, pandering essence of black people being oppressed and liberating themselves. It was just telling a good story about two rival gangs and how they would go about reconciling their differences, which is most likely through shootouts and body bags in those time periods. So yeah, but it was exploring the in-betweens of what those characters' motivations were and what led them to what they were doing, and the conflict that was inherent between both of them, and why that conflict came to be and where they are now. And like I said, the shootouts that will inevitably decide who would win what. Who would be would come out at the end of the stick. And it didn't feel like a typical good guy versus a typical bad guy. Or I didn't feel like there was an urgency to root for one side or the other. Though eventually, as the story progressed, you kind of saw where one group was probably the more diabolical and ruthless and more sinister in nature, and the other was more, they had their own, they were outlaws in essence, and they committed their own acts of violence, but they were more compassionate, they were more caring, they had more warmth to them. Of course, it's obvious given that one group is called the Nathaniel Love Gang or the Nat Love Gang, and the other group is called the Rufus Buck Gang. So Buck, Love, you can tell which one is probably the most hard and sinister, more inhuman kind of gang, and who you should probably root for. But it wasn't so clear-cut and so black and white. It was very nuanced. It was very subtle in between, understanding where these two gang leaders were coming from and their motivations that was inherent in them being who they are, and the influences that led them to where they were. You understand? And that was it. That was like the premise, and that was what led me to that film. It was refreshing to see these things brought to the screen, and the script was tight and it was rich, and it had its moment of humor. And it had its moment of humor and playfulness, but at the heart of it, there was a heart to it, and there was a sense of seriousness to it. It wasn't made to be made fun of. It wasn't trying to make fun of the Western tropes or trying to be like revolutionary in terms of how it was constructed or being like overly stylized, and I saw the influence of Quentin Tarantino in terms of the tone and the directorial style and certain camera choices, like you have snap zooms, you have ways in which the camera would pan out from like way from behind a particular character and zoom all the way out, like really way out to another character who were about to have a face off, and it was simple, but it was very effective in terms of displaying and showcasing and symbolizing the distance between these two characters and the eventual conflict both would end up having in the end. And the cinematography helped really well with that tone. It was very clean and pristine, and the costume design was awesome, and the time and place, the production design, beautiful, especially when it comes to different towns. And whenever there was, again, mentioning the influences of both films, whenever gangs arrived in different towns, there was like this big bold caption plastered across the screen with the name of the town, which reminded me of Quentin Tarantino's Django. And when it reached the White Town, like literally it was called White Town, I think, maybe, I'm not sure. It was like literally white, like white, the town was white, the places were white, the buildings were like white, banks, everything was white. It was a unique stylized directorial choice, and the costume, the set designs were like, it really was unique. That's all I can say. And yeah, the score was another aspect that I really loved, the introduction of gangs, and the introduction of the gangs whenever there was like an introduction of particular of the lead characters, there was like, I was very proud to see that it was mostly Jamaican-esque tinge musical choices and scores that were like littered throughout the film whenever introducing different characters. And it was beautiful. And I kept a smile on my face, like somebody went out of their way to really access Jamaican sampled music. Even though it had an operatic flair to it, it was inserted in particular scenes, or like I said, when there's an introduction to the gang, especially the Rufus Buck gang, and when they were about to break out, Rufus Buck, the Barrington Levy, especially the Rufus Buck gang, whenever they were introduced, the Barrington Levy's tongue-scatting delivery, the Black Roses, from the Black Roses song, was like really good. It wasn't just about these characters, like gangs robbing and they're at it with each other. There was an internal conflict that was there between the two central characters, and it was the heart of the film, and it worked in the end, and it was very satisfying to see all of this revealed, and it didn't feel like another typical one group against another group. And even though you have a lot of characters within the film, they were all made to shine in their own way, and they were given time to breathe a little. You know, it wasn't like we're being rushed from one place to the other. And given 2 hours and 17 minutes, I think that gave them enough time to kind of, I wouldn't say flesh out each 10 characters, but give them time to themselves where we can allow them to be molded, and we can see them through our eyes as people. And it worked, because there were moments where the person that stood out to me the most, Lakeith Stanfield's character, what's his name called again? Cherokee Kid or something like that, which was very underplayed and very nuanced in how he portrayed the character as this very sinister, like deadpan, wise character that for some reason was very unhesitant and very quick to kill, and his introduction was priceless, and I think the film is worth that on its own. On its own is worth just seeing Lakeith Stanfield character. And I've always been a fan of Lakeith Stanfield, even though I haven't seen all this film, but I've always had this confidence that whenever he's in something, he's going to deliver pretty well too, and he's going to bring something unique to the table. And he did just that. Regina King's and Zazie Beetz here character, they're their own person. Everybody was their own person, but I think there was a lot of emphasis on putting them, like really stressing that, oh, we're independent and we don't need no man, and even though we have men at our side, or we are at the side of men who are powerful, or who are the leaders essentially of this group, we have our own sense of agency, and we're loyal to them, but we're not like slavish to them. And nothing was wrong with that, having their own sense of agency, but I think it was stressed enough, and I think the film acknowledged this in some respects with Zazie Beetz' character, her having this level of arrogance to her having her own agency and her own sense of independence, and she didn't need no man to tell her. Even when she was being proposed to, she was like, no, I'm not ready for it yet. I'm going to do this thing to help the gang, and that's it for us. And that was to the detriment of her and the gang. And I think the film was like highlighting that fact that, okay, not because you're this ultra independent person doesn't mean you have to be selfish. Basically let your guard down and just listen to him. Right? And it's the same for Rufus Buck's Misuse. Even though the relationship isn't that romantic in nature, there's a level of heavy respect for him, and she was by his side, but again there was a level of agency and something where she felt she wasn't like under him, but she understood him enough to know why he was doing what he was doing, his motivations and what his cause was, and to the point where he didn't have to say much except, you know, a little glare, a little nod, and that was enough for her to understand what he wanted to do and the action that she should take. And she did just that. And to the point where he made her make speech on behalf of him, because she knew exactly where his mind frame was, what he was thinking, even though in the end he had to put his own violent, ultra-violent full stop to that message. And the women stood by their man, and it was refreshing to watch. Yeah, so that's my review of the film. I don't know, I'm all over the place with it, but hopefully it's enough to convince you enough to give it a watch. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.